My mom always said I'd never measure up to my sister. For years I believed her, until the day I finally answered back. What I said left her frozen, with nothing, absolutely nothing, to reply. On the surface, my childhood looked like something you'd see on a family Christmas card. Perfect smiles, matching sweaters, everyone gathered around a table loaded with homemade pies. We lived in a 2-story brick house in a quiet neighborhood outside Raleigh, North Carolina. My parents, Karen and Douglas, liked to show the world that we were a picture of stability. Dad mowing the lawn every Saturday morning, Mom heading up the PDA, my sister, Chloe, winning award after award at school. And then there was me, Emily, the other daughter. At first, I didn't notice the imbalance. When you're a kid, you accept the world as it's handed to you. If Mom clapped harder for Chloe's piano recital than she did for my art showcase, I told myself it was because Chloe played in front of a bigger crowd. If Dad bragged about Chloe's straight A's but only muttered "good job" when I brought home a B+ in English, I convinced myself it was normal. After all, Chloe was older. Chloe was special. But as the years passed, those little cracks widened. I began to realize that in our house, love wasn't evenly shared, it was a currency, and Chloe was rich while I was always in debt. Still, I tried to play along. I loved painting, and when I was 12, I begged Mom to let me join a weekend art program at the local community center. I'd saved up babysitting money to cover the fee. She smiled tightly and said, "We'll see," which I later learned was her polite way of saying no. 2 weeks later, Chloe got a brand new violin and private lessons twice a week. I told myself it didn't matter. I could still sketch in my notebooks, paint with cheap watercolors, lose myself in color when everything else felt gray. But deep down, the unfairness ate at me. Holidays became the worst. One Christmas, Chloe unwrapped a gleaming silver laptop. "For her future," Mom said proudly. I opened my box to find socks. Thick, itchy, wool socks. Everyone laughed when I forced a smile, and Chloe leaned over to whisper, "Guess you're not the star this year either." But the cruelest part wasn't the gifts, or the constant comparisons. It was how Mom framed it all as, for my own good. Whenever I complained, she'd sigh dramatically and tell me, "Emily, don't be jealous of your sister. She's going places. You should be grateful we're not wasting time or money on hobbies you'll never use." I swallowed those words like poison, letting them fester quietly. Still, there were rare moments when I felt seen. My grandmother, Dad's mom, used to visit from Asheville every few months. She'd sit with me at the kitchen table, her wrinkled hands guiding mine as I tried to capture the curve of her teacup in pencil. "You have an eye, Emily," she'd say gently. "Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." Those afternoons were my lifeline. But whenever Mom caught us, her expression hardened. "Mother, don't fill her head with nonsense. Art doesn't pay the bills." Grandma would purse her lips but say nothing, and I'd go back to shading my sketches with a pit in my stomach. By the time I entered high school, the hierarchy in our house was cemented. Chloe was the golden child, destined for greatness. I was the background noise, the spare daughter, the dumb one who would never measure up. And yet, even then, I clung to a fragile hope. Maybe one day I'd prove her wrong. Maybe one day I'd do something, anything, that would make Mom look at me and finally see me. I didn't know it then, but that day was coming. And when it did, it would shatter the illusion of our perfect family forever. The first real crack in the facade came during my sophomore year of high school. Until then, I'd managed to ignore the favoritism, to swallow down the sting and tell myself I was just being sensitive. But that year, something happened that even I couldn't excuse away. It started with the county art fair. My English teacher, Mrs. Hayes, had noticed me doodling in the margins of my essays. Instead of scolding me, she encouraged me to submit some of my sketches to the fair. "You've got something special, Emily," she told me. "Don't hide it." For the first time, I felt a spark of possibility. I stayed up late in my room, pencil smudges covering my hands, carefully selecting which drawings to present. I chose 3, a portrait of Grandma sipping tea, a sketch of the oak tree in our backyard, and a charcoal study of Chloe's violin. Ironically, the very thing that had always been used to overshadow me. When I told Mom about the fair, her face tightened. "An art fair? Really? Emily, that's not going to help you get into college. You should focus on practical subjects, like Chloe. She's looking into AP calculus, not wasting time with doodles." Her dismissal stung, but I went ahead anyway. Mrs. Hayes helped me frame the pieces, and I carried them nervously into the school gym the morning of the fair. To my shock, my portrait of Grandma won second place out of over 100 entries. Parents and students stopped to admire it, and for the first time in my life, I felt like maybe I wasn't invisible. When they called my name at the awards ceremony, my heart soared. I ran home, clutching the ribbon, eager to show my parents. Chloe was in the living room practicing her violin when I burst in. Mom! Dad! Look! I held out the ribbon like it was proof of my existence. Dad barely glanced up from his newspaper. That's nice, honey, he mumbled. Mom frowned. Second place, she said sharply. Well, Chloe never settles for second. The words landed like a slap. My smile faltered, and Chloe smirked, drawing her bow across the strings with extra flair. Don't worry, Em, she said sweetly. Not everyone can be the best. I laughed it off, but something inside me cracked. The tension only grew in the weeks that followed. At dinner one night, Dad launched into a speech about Chloe's chances at a scholarship for music. She's got discipline, drive, talent. She's destined for success. Then, turning to me, he added almost as an afterthought, and Emily, maybe you'll find a nice community college that has art classes? He chuckled, as if it were a joke. Mom didn't laugh. She fixed me with a cold stare. Emily needs to stop living in a fantasy world, she said. She's not Chloe, and she never will be. The silence after her words was deafening. Even Chloe looked uncomfortable for a second, though she quickly masked it with another smug grin. I felt the heat rising in my chest. For the first time, I wanted to fight back. But my voice caught in my throat, and I stared down at my plate, ashamed. That night, lying in bed, I replayed the conversation over and over. It wasn't just favoritism anymore. It was cruelty. Mom wasn't simply ignoring me, she was actively cutting me down, making sure I knew my place. And the worst part? I believed her. For weeks after, I couldn't bring myself to draw. My sketchbook stayed shoved in the bottom drawer of my desk, gathering dust. Every time I thought about picking up a pencil, I heard Mom's voice in my head. You're not Chloe. You never will be. But deep down, a spark of anger was beginning to glow. I didn't recognize it yet, but it was there, waiting. One day, it would ignite into something powerful. For now though, I was still trapped, half desperate for Mom's approval, half suffocated by her disdain. And I didn't yet realize that this was only the beginning. The real storm was still coming. By junior year, the cracks in my family's perfect picture had widened into canyons. I had always known Chloe was the favorite, but now it felt like my parents were actively working to keep me in her shadow. It started small. One evening, I asked Dad if he could drive me to the local library's weekend workshop on digital art. I'd seen a flyer and felt a flicker of excitement. Maybe learning graphic design could be a practical way to merge my passion with a future career. Dad didn't even look up from his phone. Ask your mom, he muttered. Mom's answer came swift and sharp. We don't have time for that nonsense. Besides, Chloe has a recital that weekend. Don't expect us to rearrange everything for your little hobbies. Little hobbies. That phrase echoed in my skull. Meanwhile, Chloe's needs were treated like sacred commandments. If she wanted private violin lessons in the city, my parents drove her an hour each way, no questions asked. If she hinted at needing new shoes, Mom whisked her off to the mall before the week was over. My victories, however small, were dismissed or twisted. When I got an A on my history paper, Mom shrugged and said, history isn't a real subject. Chloe's grades in math are what matter. When my art teacher recommended me for a state-level competition, Dad waved it off. Don't get your hopes up. You'll only be disappointed. The message was clear. Chloe was building a future. I was wasting space. The isolation deepened when my parents began interfering with my friendships. My best friend, Leah, lived 2 streets over, and we'd been inseparable since 5th grade. We'd spend hours sketching, listening to music, and whispering about crushes. But Mom grew critical. Leah's a distraction, she said. If you're with her, you're not improving yourself. And let's be honest, Emily, you can't afford to slack off. When I protested, Mom's voice turned icy. If you want to keep living under this roof, you'll respect our rules. The next time Leah called, Mom told her I was too busy. Then she quietly took my phone away, locking it in her bedroom drawer. I felt like I was suffocating. Even Chloe began to echo my parents' cruelty, perhaps emboldened by their approval. One night, while she practiced scales in the living room, she smirked at me and said, you know, Mom's right. You'll never be me. Maybe if you stopped pretending you're talented, you'd actually find something useful to do. Her words stung, not because they were new, but because they came from her, the sister who used to build blanket forts with me, who used to sneak me candy under the dinner table. That Chloe was gone, replaced by someone who basked in our parents' favoritism like a queen soaking in sunlight. The worst came during one of Mom's infamous family talks. We were seated around the kitchen table, the air heavy with the smell of lasagna. Mom leaned forward, her voice measured but sharp. Emily, you need to face reality. You're not going to win scholarships or make us proud with your little drawings. Chloe is carrying this family's hopes. You should learn to support her instead of embarrassing yourself. I stared at her, stunned. Embarrassing myself? I whispered. Yes, she snapped. Every time you push this art nonsense, you drag us down. Why can't you just accept who you are? You're not special, Emily. And you never will be. The silence that followed was crushing. Even Dad avoided my eyes, nodding along as if Mom's cruelty was gospel truth. That night, I lay in bed, tears soaking my pillow, replaying every insult, every dismissal. It wasn't just favoritism anymore, it was a deliberate campaign to break me, to keep me small. But here's the thing about isolation. It sharpens you. It strips away the noise, the illusions. As much as I ached for love, as much as I longed for validation, a small, stubborn flame burned inside me. I didn't know how yet, but I was going to prove them wrong. And one day, when I finally did, my mother, the woman who told me I'd never be as good as my sister, would have no choice but to choke on her own words. The breaking point came in the spring of my senior year, just when I thought things couldn't get worse. I had secretly applied to a small art program at a university out of state. I didn't dare tell my parents. I knew the ridicule I'd face, but with the help of Mrs. Hayes, my English teacher, I put together a portfolio and sent it in. To my shock, not only was I accepted, but I was awarded a partial scholarship for my work. For the first time in years, I felt like maybe I had a way out. The letter arrived in a crisp white envelope, tucked among the usual bills. I carried it to my room, hands trembling, and opened it alone. When I saw the words, "We are pleased to inform you," I nearly collapsed with relief. I wanted to keep it private, savor the victory for myself. But in my excitement, I made a mistake. I left the acceptance letter sitting on my desk. That evening, when I returned from the library, Mom was waiting in my room, the letter in her hand. Her face was pale, her lips pressed into a thin line. "What is this?" she demanded. I swallowed hard. "It's my acceptance. I got in. With a scholarship." Her eyes narrowed. "You went behind our backs. You applied for this nonsense without our approval." "It's not nonsense," I said, voice shaking. "This is my chance, Mom. My chance to finally do something for myself." Her laugh was sharp and cruel. "Do something for yourself? You think this is about you? You think we're going to let you waste money and time chasing fantasies while Chloe is carrying this family? You're pathetic, Emily." Dad appeared in the doorway, his expression unreadable. "What's going on?" "She thinks she's leaving us," Mom spat, waving the letter. "She thinks she's going to be some kind of artist." Dad frowned. "That's not realistic. You'll just end up broke. Better to stay here, get a job, support Chloe's future." Their words felt like daggers, but it was what happened next that shattered me. Chloe entered, curious about the shouting. Mom handed her the letter, and Chloe read it quickly before smirking. "Well, congratulations, Em," she said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "Second place again. Because let's be honest, you'll never actually make it." I couldn't breathe. It wasn't enough for them to dismiss me, they needed to humiliate me, to remind me of my place. But the revelation didn't come from them. It came a week later, from an unexpected source. I was in the library trying to study when Leah, my old best friend whom Mom had driven away, sat down across from me. "I heard about your scholarship," she whispered. I froze. "How?" "Your mom told my parents," she said quietly. "She said you were being ridiculous, that you needed to be put in your place." My stomach twisted. She told them that?" Leah hesitated, then pulled out her phone. "There's more. I don't know if you want to see this, but you should." On her screen was a string of emails. Somehow, she had gotten hold of messages between my mom and Chloe's violin coach. My mother had written, "Don't worry about Emily's little art distraction. We'll crush her hopes before she gets any ideas. Chloe is our only priority." Crush her hopes. Those were her exact words. I sat there in stunned silence, my pulse roaring in my ears. It wasn't just neglect. It wasn't just favoritism. It was deliberate. My own mother wanted to destroy me, to keep me small, to ensure I never threatened Chloe's shine. In that moment, something inside me shifted. The years of doubt, the tears, the desperate longing for approval, all of it hardened into resolve. If they wanted to crush me, they were about to find out just how unbreakable I really was. This was no longer about art. It was about survival. It was about proving, once and for all, that I wasn't the worthless shadow they claimed I was. And I swore right then and there that I would fight back, no matter what it took. Once the truth settled, that my mother was actively plotting to keep me small, something hardened inside me. For years I had begged, cried, and twisted myself into knots to earn a scrap of approval. But if her mission was to crush my hopes, then mine would be to rise higher than she ever thought possible. The problem was, I had no allies at home. If I was going to fight back, I had to be smart, strategic. The first step was reclaiming control of my scholarship. My parents had already hinted at forcing me to decline it, threatening to cut me off financially. But I wasn't about to let them. I went to Mrs. Hayes, the teacher who had helped me apply, and told her everything. Not all the ugly details, just enough so she understood the stakes. She listened quietly, then said, "Emily, you deserve this. You're going to fight for it, and I'll help you." Together, we contacted the university and arranged to have all communications sent directly to my personal email, not the family address my mother sometimes monitored. I also requested the scholarship funds be managed through the school directly, bypassing any chance of parental interference. It was a small victory, but it gave me momentum. The second step was building a support system. I reconnected with Leah, apologizing for how my parents had driven us apart. To my relief, she forgave me. "I always knew it wasn't your fault," she said softly. Her loyalty felt like oxygen in a suffocating room. Leah also connected me with her older cousin, Daniel, who worked part-time as a paralegal. He explained that once I turned 18, my parents couldn't legally control where I went to school or how I spent my scholarship. But, he cautioned, they might try emotional manipulation or financial sabotage. "You'll need proof of what they've done if you want to protect yourself." Proof. That became my third step. For weeks, I began quietly collecting evidence. I saved screenshots of my mother's cruel texts, recorded snippets of conversations where she dismissed me as useless or a burden. Leah even forwarded the emails she'd found, the ones where my mom bragged about crushing my dreams. Every piece was tucked away in a secure folder on Daniel's advice. Meanwhile, at home, I played along. I nodded when Mom lectured me, pretended to agree when Dad told me to be practical, even clapped politely at Chloe's endless recitals. But inside, I was planning my counterstrike. The real test came when Chloe was invited to perform at a statewide music gala, a big event, the kind my parents lived for. All their attention was on her as usual, and I realized, this was my chance. If I wanted to expose the truth, I needed an audience, and what better stage than a room full of people who worshipped Chloe and my parents? With Leah's help, I devised a plan. At the gala, I'd present my own performance. Not on stage, but through the truth. It started with a simple USB drive. On it, I loaded copies of the incriminating emails and recordings. Leah helped me create a presentation, a slideshow of quotes, timestamps, and messages that revealed exactly how far my mother had gone to keep me down. The night of the gala, my hands trembled as I slipped the USB into my bag. Chloe was radiant, dressed in her shimmering gown, basking in the attention. My parents beamed at her, proud and oblivious. But as the event unfolded, something strange happened. For the first time, I didn't feel small. I didn't feel like the shadow. Instead, I felt powerful, because I knew something they didn't. When the time came, I excused myself, sneaking to the tech booth. Leah was already there, her cousin Daniel standing guard. With shaking fingers, I handed the USB to the technician, who agreed to cue it up after Chloe's performance. As Chloe's bow slid across the strings, filling the hall with delicate music, I held my breath. The crowd applauded thunderously when she finished, my parents practically glowing with pride. And then, the screen behind the stage flickered. At first, it looked like a technical glitch. But then the words appeared, bold and undeniable, "We'll crush Emily's hopes before she gets any ideas." The audience gasped. A murmur rippled through the hall. Slide after slide appeared, emails, quotes, messages. My mother's words, my father's dismissals, Chloe's taunts. A portrait of cruelty, painted in their own handwriting and voices. I stepped forward, my voice steady though my heart thundered. "This is my family. This is how they've treated me. And I'm done being their shadow." The silence that followed was deafening. My mother's face went white, Dad sputtered, and Chloe dropped her violin in shock. In that moment, I wasn't the invisible daughter anymore. I wasn't the dumb one, the useless one, the shadow. I was Emily. And they would never, ever forget it. The silence after my words stretched so long it felt like the air itself had frozen. Faces turned toward my parents, eyes narrowed, whispers swelling like a wave rolling across the hall. For years I had been invisible. Now, suddenly, all eyes were on me. My mother was the first to recover. She lurched to her feet, her voice shrill and panicked. "This is lies. She's manipulated this. Emily's always been jealous of Chloe. She's twisting everything to make herself look like a victim." But the evidence was still flashing on the giant screen. Email headers with her account name, text conversations with her number, voice recordings with her unmistakable tone. Each slide was a dagger cutting through the facade she had built. Chloe looked stricken, her hands trembling around her violin. She whispered something to Dad, who tried to stand but faltered, sweat beading on his forehead. "Turn it off," he barked at the technician. But Daniel was already there, blocking the controls, calm and immovable. "This isn't manipulation," I said, my voice carrying through the microphone someone had handed me. "This is the truth. My truth. And the proof is all right there." The audience was split. Some gasped in sympathy, others shook their heads, stunned that the perfect family had cracks this deep. A woman in the front row muttered, "Oh my God," while another whispered, "I knew something was off." Then, unexpectedly, Chloe's composure cracked. Tears welled in her eyes, and she dropped her violin with a clatter that echoed like a G**NSH*T in the silent hall. "Mom, you really wrote that," she whispered, her voice breaking. You actually said Emily was a mistake?" The room held its breath. For the first time, my mother couldn't mask her contempt. She turned sharply to Chloe, snapping, "Don't you start. Everything I've done has been for you. For your future. You're the star, Chloe, not her." It was like she'd stabbed her favorite child in the chest. Chloe's expression shifted from confusion to horror to betrayal. "You used me," she whispered, her lips trembling. "You pitted me against her because it made you feel powerful." Gasps rippled through the crowd again. My father tried to salvage what was left, his voice deep and commanding. "Enough. Emily, this spectacle ends now. You've embarrassed us enough for one lifetime." He grabbed my arm, but this time I didn't shrink. I pulled free and faced him. "No, Dad. You embarrassed yourselves. You told the world who you really are, you just never thought anyone would hold up a mirror." Applause broke out, not from everyone, but from enough people to shift the energy in the room. A few teachers, Leah, even some parents in the front rows. The sound built, hesitant at first, then growing, filling the hall. My parents froze in disbelief as the audience they'd courted for years turned against them. Then, Chloe did something I'll never forget. She stepped up to the microphone beside me, tears still streaking her face, and said, "Emily's telling the truth. I've seen it. I've lived it. Mom and Dad have used me as their golden child while they crushed her over and over. I won't defend them anymore." The dam burst. People started murmuring loudly, some booing my parents, others clapping harder. The illusion of perfection shattered, and all that was left was the raw, ugly truth. My mother screamed Chloe's name like a curse, her face twisted in fury, but security guards approached. The gala organizers, horrified by the scene, insisted my parents step outside. Dad argued, Mom raged, but they were ushered out, their protests drowned by the crowd's noise. And then, silence again. Everyone looked at me. I stood there shaking, adrenaline roaring in my veins, but for the first time I felt tall. Seen. Whole. "This isn't just about me," I told the crowd, my voice firm. "It's about every kid who's ever been told they're worthless, every sibling crushed to make another shine. We all deserve to be seen. We all deserve to matter." The applause this time was thunderous. The days following the gala felt surreal, like I had stepped into a different world. For years I had dreamed of people finally hearing me, but I never imagined the fallout would be so immediate, so irreversible. News of the incident spread faster than wildfire. A few parents who'd recorded the confrontation posted the video online. By morning, it had gone viral in our town, then beyond. "Daughter exposes parents at gala," blazed across headlines, and though my name was attached, it didn't feel shameful, it felt liberating. At school, the atmosphere shifted overnight. The same classmates who used to smirk when my mom called me the dumb one now approached me with wide eyes, some apologizing for not noticing, others offering quiet support. Teachers who had written me off as unfocused or lazy treated me with a newfound respect, asking if I needed resources or recommendations for college. Leah stayed by my side through it all. "You did what I always wished I could do," she told me one afternoon. "You stood up to them. You forced the truth into the open." For the first time, our friendship felt balanced again. No secrets, no shame weighing me down. But not everything was applause and relief. My parents tried to control the narrative. My mother sent a string of venomous messages, insisting I had ruined Chloe's future and burned the family name. My father called me a selfish brat who had betrayed them. Yet, their threats no longer pierced me. Their words were powerless now that the world had seen who they truly were. The shock came when Chloe reached out. She asked to meet in the park where we used to play as kids. I hesitated, bracing for another round of cruelty, but when I saw her, she looked like a completely different person. Drained, hollow. "I'm sorry," she whispered before I could speak. "I let them pit me against you for so long. I thought I was winning, but I was just their puppet. You were the only one brave enough to break free." Hearing those words was like a balm I hadn't realized I needed. We sat for hours, talking honestly for the first time in years. She admitted she didn't even love the violin anymore. It had become a cage. I told her I still loved her, despite everything, and maybe, just maybe, we could rebuild from the wreckage. Meanwhile, the scholarship program reached out after seeing the video. They admired my resilience and offered to expand my aid, covering nearly all my tuition. For the first time, my future felt like it was mine alone. The house I had once dreaded returning to became just a stopgap until I could move out. My parents, now pariahs in the community, grew more isolated each day. The whispers that once crushed me now circled them. Irony, sharp and satisfying. The night before I left for college, I stood in my childhood room, staring at the walls that had heard every insult, every tear. I whispered a quiet goodbye, not just to the room, but to the version of me that once thought she was unworthy. I wasn't the dumb one. I wasn't the shadow. I was Emily. And I had a voice. At orientation, I introduced myself to new classmates without shame weighing down my chest. I joined the art club, met mentors who valued creativity, and slowly pieced together the self my parents had tried to bury. Every sketch, every brushstroke, became an act of defiance and healing. Months later, Chloe visited my dorm. She was taking small steps away from our parents' control, applying for programs she actually wanted. "You saved me too," she admitted. "By standing up for yourself, you gave me permission to question everything." It wasn't a perfect ending. Our parents never apologized, never softened, but I no longer needed their approval. Their absence in my life wasn't a wound anymore. It was freedom. Now, when I look back, I don't see the pain as wasted. I see it as the fire that forged me. Because sometimes, being told you'll never be enough is the very thing that drives you to prove that you always were. And when I stand in front of my art, hanging in galleries I never thought I'd reach, I smile. Not for them, but for me. For the girl who was never supposed to rise, yet did.